So how do I get the footprint shrunk on some of these training devices such that I can deploy them? And then I can get that same training efficacy that we'll have in Fallon in the ITF and bring that out to the ships, to have that level-loaded training performance across the entire ecosystem and not have folks petering out on their training as they come back from deployment and needing some type of a rehack sometimes before they go into sustainment phase. So, so that's the biggest parts of what I'm looking for. Is it all fully funded? Nope. We got some work to do in getting TIX-2 into F-35 and into E-2s and making sure that we do that. But we're starting to look forward now as well. So sixth generation aircraft should be coming to us with training systems fully embedded. We have to stop thinking about training as a Band-Aid onto a platform. It's got to be integrated from day one into everything that we buy.
Yeah, I'll just add a little more technical details underneath that. So joint simulation environment is being connected with the integrated training facility. The backbone of what is being built in JSC is going to continue to inform and help out with what's going on with training. But from a modeling and simulation piece, we are trying to make that even more robust. JSC was built for F-35. How do we integrate the rest of the Air Force and Navy, Naval Aviation, Navy surface into that type of environment we talked about? That starts further left, also weapons. We have the Integrated Fires Lab out at NOC-WD where we're developing modeling and simulation standards that are going to be fully integratable into these environments. So what you should be seeing from programs as we move forward, this is a vision state, but what you should start to see is standards that come out in contracts. So there's going to be a family of systems of modeling and simulation. If you need to learn what that is or work with us, we'd love to have that conversation. But learning about JSC, learning about integrated fires, learning about some of these labs that are trying to set the standards and set the modeling and simulation forward so that when we develop them, they're already interoperable. We're not having to go back and Band-Aid the different M&S environments together. We're also experimenting with how are we going to take some of the different lines of effort that have been going on between test and move them into training. As we're moving forward with the light virtual constructive JSC environments, the bottom line kind of environment that builds from a integrated air defense systems, electronic warfare environments, that integration with real systems on ranges, that integration with virtual that we could inject via the link and other things is all being experimented in some of the experimentation efforts I talked about. So lots of opportunity to learn and grow and make it more collaborative so that it actually can include many vendors. It doesn't all have to be from one vendor. And so that's the goal, is to make it interoperable across with standards that you can understand and build to as you need to.
All right. So JSE and all things simulation, integration are in our wheelhouse. We've attacked this for as long as I've been here. We've had exercises. We had Operation Blended Border where we actually did integration on the show floor. We developed labs at NOC-TSD to try to facilitate coming to common standards. I mean, as I walk around the show floor, there's standards becomes a very common theme. You know, where, okay, throw that out, but, you know, you don't give me a standard and everybody gives me something different. So the everybody gives me different is all part of the problem. And we've actually asked for help vertically, you know, to try to do it because it doesn't solve itself. We do bridging and we do things that slow the system down. So as we try to go into those big simulation things with 5G and as I talk to the Air Force, when they talk about JSE, they almost talk about future and legacy because the legacy is hard, right? It's just like it is for everything when we try to pull those things together. But we're very interested in the mechanics of that, so please let us know how we can help. Okay, so I think that we'll look forward to that. I mean, in my life, TIX-2 was program of record in 2013 that we were going to have 2 years later, and then, you know, we're still here. So we're interested in the final solution on that as well. I have one for the FRC. So,
Sure.
all right. Someone had the distinct pleasure of visiting an FRC recently, heard anecdotes about work delays related to not having data rights for parts. And the engineers had to re-engineer parts and assemblies. So to what degree do you think modeling simulation or the lack of data rights is an issue in the FRC?
So data rights is we could be here all day on data rights in the acquisition process. We are trying to be much more targeted in what we ask for and why we're asking for it with our industry partners. The ability to sustain long-term, really an environment that complements the industry goals rather than contradicts it is where we're headed. There's a period in most acquisition life cycles where the industry partner will want and need to move on to newer platforms. We'll need to bring that capability. The FRCs have the ability to work on what the fleet needs, not necessarily what is most profitable. So data rights and those special purpose data rights that allow us to do that, allow us to reverse engineer parts, particularly as we usher in some advanced metal additive manufacturing techniques, are going to be critical. I'd love to hear more about which example and which visit to which FRC brought the question forward, but it is a good question, and I encourage all of our industry partners to come in with a coherent, open-minded strategy on data rights as we go into any evolution, particularly when we're talking about physical parts that will have to be sustained for, in many cases, 4 decades. So understand what those data rights mean to your business plans, and understand the opportunity on the government side as we improve our own manufacturing techniques internally to come up with a complementary arrangement there.
Hey, Joe, want the entry to the door there for the sustainment program baseline?
Yes, sir.
How that is built, not only for FRC, but also how we, what we buy, what we expect for maintenance, O&I level maintenance. How you're involved with program management after we get out of the R&D side of the house in the sustainment program baseline development. How we're going to build a platform and maintain a platform through the life of the platform. So good decisions were made years ago. That industry was going to have a majority stake in the sustainment side. We've kind of moved to a different view right now, and I'll be glad to talk to any of the industry partners on or actually Admiral Morley would be glad to talk to any industry partners on where we're moving towards. But your interaction in the SPV development, it'll be critical.
So I think data rights, when I was in the F-35 beginning, we discovered we didn't have any data rights, and Lockheed owned the whole thing, and then we decided we were going to go buy that, and it was unaffordable. So I think if you go into manufacturing industries like auto, every part of the car has a data package. They use that to actually simulate the car and put it all together and make it run. So there's a great power in what is a digital transformation. So if you're going to do a digital transformation, you really need the digital part of that, and if you're going to make a digital twin, you need the same thing as well. So it's a different philosophy, and it works for them because they own it, and they can, if somebody goes out of business, they take the data package, they go to another vendor, and they say, make me some of that, and it helps the supply chain. So anyway, so here's one of my favorite questions, and it's not for me, so it's for Admiral Wenzel. It says, who is the integrator, advocate, or head person in charge supporting Department of the Navy training in the Pentagon? Is there a need for some belly button that does training, like the A3T? What this means, A3T on the Air Force staff. Any thoughts on that? It's my question for 10 years, by the way.
Well, I guess if I get rid of the Title 10, the MT and E side of the house, or get relieved, one or the other, I'm the integrator for that. I work through Pedro Garvin for Ready Relevant Learning for the enlisted side, from accession to FRS completion through SNAP for that, and for the advanced training side and integration across the joint, as well as our coalition partners. I work with Pepper for that, and then from the funding side of the house, it goes through buckets. So it starts with the vision. Start with the vision piece of where naval aviation is going. That's naval aviation. So Chevy at NavAir, Homie Cedarholm with the Marine Corps, and we're the three horsemen of the apocalypse. When it comes down to where naval aviation is going to go across the M, T, and E side of the house. So if you're looking for a belly button for the T side of the house, one of the heads that I own, supported by very, very competent folks, is the air boss side. And it goes back, and I'm not going to apologize or say that is a broken process right now. As Admiral Lesher was at Vice GNO, he says, if everyone is in charge, no one's in charge. So there is a consolidated vision. That vision plays out across the major constituents here. And if their actions that produce outcomes do not contribute to the vision, then through our drumbeats of meeting, then those actions are now ostracized from the system.
Okay?
Am I okay, or y'all okay with that?
No.
Now, if I don't have the MT and E Title 10 side out, I'm going to shift uniforms, Admiral Rob right here, I'm going to walk out.
Okay. I think that, when I was in 78, like I said, whoever has prioritization, whoever runs the budget is the place where I'm not really saying quality training, I'm just saying that somebody's got to argue the value of training in the budgeting process. Go in there, fight it out.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment for Bucket. There isn't, and you're right, as you reach back to 78 P now, as it's 98, once a month I'm at the Pentagon, in a very dark room with his program managers, as we look out. I'm interested with 2025, but I'm fascinated with 2035. And whenever I walk into his spaces, every letter of the calendar and the capabilities 2030 or greater. So his team is thinking well out in front of that. Feeding Pete's enlisted, Pepper's officer training, our new accessions piece, all of that feeds into a consistent model so that if called upon in this GPC environment, that training will now turn into delivery of effects and bottom line, a win.
Yeah, okay. So, Air Boss, how are we doing with the flight hour program after the return to readiness? I mean, because this was a big issue with pilots,
Yeah.
obviously with the folks that were left home.
That's a great question. Bucket's done a phenomenal job fighting for flight hour programs for us. So a couple answers to that. First of all, because we didn't have mission capable platforms, we just, we were flying what we had, the 250 to 255 Super Hornets that we had, and we said that, we'll get better if you just give us more money, and we'll buy supplies, we'll buy more flight hours, we'll keep buying and stuff. So there was a folklore going around that the flight hour program and the 5 pedals in the flight hour program, AVDLR, depot contracts, the fuel itself, if we just get more flight hour money, then we'll be a hell of a lot better in naval aviation. What we didn't understand is we had to have a civilian company come in to tell us how to do our maintenance. Once we got all of our platforms up to mission capability rates and the numbers that we need to execute the O plan, then the flight hour program could be executed. So that money that we were giving away to other communities because we weren't executing the flight hour because we didn't have mission capable platforms, we're not giving that money away now. Last year, we're finishing up, both Airland and Airpac are finishing up at 99.9% flight hour program, the flight hour program. We ended up at 99.9% execution of our flight hour program. And I track every community, both pilot, NFO, and aircrew, what hours they're getting. I'm getting more concerns now on, hey, we're we're a little tired, we're flying a lot. And as a former sky pig, I would love to be in that situation that we have right now. We're not overdoing readiness, so this isn't one where I'm looking for I'm asking for a cut to the flight hour program. The MC rate that we have, and now full mission capability rate, is based on the platforms that we need to execute the O plan. Based on the training and readiness syllabus, offset with what we demonstrated we've executed over the last 10 years through the SHARP program, so what we've actually logged, we have proven with the MC capability, and now full mission capability, that we can execute the flight hours and we can execute the training that Pepper develops at Top Gun, and the kids that are coming into the fleet right now are trained properly by Sinatra's people and SNAP's folks. I think the alignment is working, it works pretty well right now. We're still tweaking full mission capability, and we're still tweaking the capability, the big C of CAA, so that our weapon systems and some of the things that we need to support the O plan, that those things are going to be delivered to us on time. But right now, I have no problem with the flight hour program. Bucket's done a great job of getting us the money.
Anybody else?
Just a couple things on that, but so what Air Boss is talking about is basically knowing our business. And so you got the ability now to, you can't have a fleet of 250 Super Hornets go to a fleet of 360 Hornets without an increase in Delta cost for spares required to keep that number of airplanes operating. But because we now know our business, we can quantify that cost by tail for an MC jet and an FMC jet. That allows me to work the hallways of the building and have a cogent argument that's irrefutable to, hey, here's the readiness required to support the O plan. Here's the Delta readiness required to go from 250 to 360 in Super Hornets, and therefore we now understand our business, and this is what you need to give me for spares. It's an irrefutable argument, but it comes from doing all the work that Air Boss talked about.
So that big injection of money, raise readiness, you gotta have a tail, as you're saying, but completely agree. So switching a little bit here to unmanned, as for identified for the Air Boss, says with MQ-25 IOC planned for 2025, how does the Navy plan to train a new type of aviator on its first operational unmanned carrier-based tour, along with a community of sorts? What would be
Yeah, that's a good question.
unmanned community?
Yeah, we're graduating in, I think, February or March, our first 10 unmanned vehicle operators from Sinatra, so I'll let Snap jump on that. This isn't going to be defibrillator paddles to Naval Aviation's chest here. So it's going to be 13 XXs, pilots and NFOs. They're going to teach the UVO, the unmanned vehicle operators. You know, we're going to have some startup current to eventually go to a UVO population. It's going to be reversible, as I've learned from working for Admiral Aquilino, Admiral Caparo, Admiral Caudle, is you don't start any initiative and then learn fast, fail fast, and be able to reverse it. It's going to be reversible. We're starting off slow with this first 10 group of unmanned. 7 of them came from the military, and 3 of them were direct injects that came from outside. That we're submitting for it right now. So Buck 19's got 2+ years since Pete Pedro flew them over into Guam, the 2 platforms there. Fire Scout, we just de-established the final Bravo variants of Fire Scout. We're flying Charlie variants right now, and then MQ-25 is going to be our next variant as we move towards CNO's vision of potentially 60% unmanned side of the house. So we're training them now. We have systems to train them on, but we're going to be reversible. 13 XX, normal, 1310s, 1320s are going to be the backbone until we get the UVOs up to speed. They have to understand the environment that they're stepping into for that.
So as I said, June is when we're looking at. Got 10 initially, we're down to 9. We had unfortunately lost 1. But those first 9 have been doing phenomenal work. And it is not like we just created this, I mean, we've been doing unmanned for many years. We've learned from the Air Force and the way the Air Force has done it. We've learned from the Marine Corps as well. In fact, we're partnering with the Marine Corps down there in Pensacola, and we look to start training their operators as well. So those first 9 are going to go off and help develop the training syllabus so that we'll have something. We're not rushing into this. We're doing it at a methodical pace, but one that's deliberate. We're going to make sure we have everything right so when MQ-25 hits the fleet, we're going to be ready to hit it.
Okay, so that's going to be fun to watch. It's great, and I think it's got a lot of potential. We talked with a lot of the teams about this is a pilot program to see, just walk, figure it out, see if it works. I have a question again for the Air Boss. It's from it's from a fellow Naval Force person, which means he's a Marine. But he says, please describe the risk as it applies to a student naval aviator or winged pilot when it comes to replacing actual flight hours with good simulator hours. Is it, what's the thought process, or is there a methodology?
Yeah, I think everybody's got a comment on this, and so right now I'm looking at the F-35 and the percentage separation between live and simulation. Bucket's already talked about, or Pepper talked about it. A level 2 wingman comes right out of the FRS, so the fleet doesn't have to train a level 2. So the balance between the two, we've talked about it, sir. You were part of the discussions years ago. What is the balance between live, and then what is the balance in simulation? And we talked about the JSC environment. That simulator, put the helmet on, is absolutely phenomenal. You have to have the simulation piece. It's got to grow in complexity so that it does actually mirror what live flights look like. And then as a baseline right now, I'm looking at the percentage separation between live and sim that is proven right now in JSF. I'm not going to tell you what that percentage is right now, but it preserves significant flight time for the pilots. First of all, there's got to be a fear factor. You got to understand the difference between a sim crashing and reset and you actually crashing and not resetting. And the fact is there's got to be an end-to-end test of your weapon system to go out and fly the platform. So with MCFMC, that gives me the data that I need to have for if FMC rates start to fall down, then that's a war fighting capability. If they fall down, then that means I probably cranked back too much on the simulation side, not flying the live side, and then spares and the FDLRs, all the other tail that hasn't kept up with that. And then when it comes down to the reps and sets, with Pepper's syllabus side for ACTC, Air Combat Training Continuum, level 1 through 5, if we get failures at those levels, and that's also going to tell me that I've either got an issue in the simulator or I've got an issue in the live piece, since our check flights are still flown live. So again, there's good alignment. I think we've thought through so that we don't knee-jerk and go wrong in the wrong direction.
So as I said at the beginning, we're looking at how do I shorten the syllabus in order to get folks through. But what really matters is, are they equal to or better than those that we've had go through in the past? The answer has to be yes. We can't send trash out to the fleet because, one, it can kill people, especially when you think Marine Corps, potentially carrying a bunch of Marines in the back. So you have to be equal to or better. With that said, the data is proving that simulation is not like the simulator that I was when I flew an A4 simulator and just kind of in a box. I mean, the amount of complexity that you can bring in a simulator for certain skill sets, it's worth pulling them in. So for example, one of the things we're looking at for the T-45 as we look to redo that syllabus is all of those of us that have been in the back of a T-45 or an A4MI doing instrument flights, underneath the hood, you can only do so much. It's more a matter of, I don't want to get sick in the back of this with a hood over the back. Why can't all of those be done in a simulator where I can actually have you break out, or not break out, and I can actually have you give you emergencies, actually have you do things that the pilot in the front would have been violated for. So that's many hours of time that we could potentially put into a simulator. And now when I look at it, what I really look at is what can I bring that Pepper's requiring in the FRS or higher, where it's costing me 10 to 15 times the cost. What skill sets can I bring down into the training command where I'm doing it now in a T-45 at 5,000 hours, or how do I take some T-45 flights and move them to a T-6 at $750 an hour? And we're looking closely at that, and I think there's a lot of there to it, and we do have data scientists that are actually looking closely at it. I'll turn it over to Pepper for that.
Yeah, I think there's two ways that we drive down risk by going to simulation or complementing live with simulation. Number one, the simulator and the software that we're using has to match the aircraft. It has to be seamless going from a box to the jet. Right now, that is not true. There are differences. Software gets delivered late. The simulator doesn't match, and so you can't go into a simulator by starting the brief. These are the things that are not the same as the airplane. That is, or going or stopping a simulated flight and working with somebody to explain why it's not working, or this is not what you're going to see in the jet. Likewise, when you go to the aircraft, starting a brief, well, we know you did the simulator, but it's going to be different in the airplane. That can't happen. The other thing is really on us that wear flight suits and wings. You have to treat a simulator like a real flight. I mean, it's got to have the same brief time. You've got to hold each other accountable, like Air Boss alluded to. Crashing a simulator has to be treated as bad as crashing an aircraft. And so there are those things. And when you get out, you don't high five and walk out of the building. You go in there. There are debriefing tools now, especially in F-35, and we brought it into F-18, where you can sit down and have as detailed debrief as you did flying an Air Wing Fallon event or a WTI course. So if we want to do this, simulation has to match the aircraft, and we have to treat simulation LVC like we're really flying airplanes. And that it's not much more complex than that.
Throw one other thing on there is, so the one thing we haven't really talked about, when you talk about simulators versus flying airplanes, there's other ways you can fly airplanes and still generate that flight time without the cost per flight hours associated with 5th or potentially 6th gen flying hours. So something we are taking a look at is tactical surrogates. So what if there was an airplane that I could fly for $7,000 or $8,000 an hour that had a large area display, that had the identical look to an F-35 or a Block 3 Super Hornet, had the same exact HOTAS as those things, except it didn't have the mission systems installed. Those mission systems were all done via LVC. And so then it drives the cost of my platform down to the floor, drives my cost per flight hour down, yet it still gives training value to that aviator with air underneath their butts. And so it's really getting that danger piece and the ability to replicate these skill sets in the air. And I think there's significant value to, is it all of it? Absolutely not. But I think that we can bend the cost curve in that manner by doing something like a tactical surrogate.
I think that's a great question, and we did 2% simulators, I think, in our day. And we've seen where we have to do live flying in simulators, right? So I mean, it's kind of flipped on its head. And I think that the culture is realizing that that's a requirement now. And so we should keep thinking through that, as well as the safety part of it. Coming up with safety, Air Boss, how are we doing with safety in general?
Yeah, we've 21 and 22 have been some difficult years for us when it comes down to the numbers. If you look, if I just look at the number side of the house, with Class A, Bs. Class A and Bs, our numbers have stayed relatively similar, but when it comes to the cost of the platforms and the replacement pieces, when we go out and crunch and do stuff to platforms, the cost has gone, our cost has gone through the roof, almost 2 to 3 times what it's cost us over previous years. What we have seen is what has been very clear to us from the data is our AGMs, or our ground mishaps, have gone through the roof. GSE gear, crunching aircraft, taxiing into each other, taxiing into fences, taxiing into JLG lifts. We've got some self-inflicted wounds here that we've had to focus on, and that's been the focus over the last year as we now work with the Navy Safety Command and transition into accurate assessments on where the risk is being transferred, where's the training for our enlisted folks, where as we come out of the COVID environment where we told everybody to separate, be individuals, we'll pass the information over electronic means, the flight schedule, the plan of the day. Now we bring everyone back together again. It comes down in some cases just simplicity of chiefs, division officers, branch officers, showing the young folks and showing all of us what right looks like. I think it's the second and third order effect coming out of the COVID environment, where the lessons that we learned from reading reports and understanding where mistakes were occurring and having that oversight piece that was part of our culture, we drifted a little bit in that culture over the last 2 years and bringing it back now in 23. The numbers are not great right now. The other piece is we brought the visibility. The visibility has gone up significantly, and another Class E category has been added for reporting purposes there. So it's given us, with the data, it's given us a significant area to work on. It's been my focus area. Now the warfighting piece seems to be on the track, the safety side of the house. So we've got some room to improve on the safety, and we've got a plan that we are executing right now, moving out with that safety plan.
Okay. Well, our time is running out, so I'm going to ask one question about Airbus. What are the reserves doing now to help join the GPC fight? How can they help?
I'll take that one, Air Boss. CNR just came out and visited Fallon and had an opportunity to look at what we can do to better utilize the reserves on a GPC counterpart. So specifically, I am partnered with them. I mentioned the F-16 and the adversary program and how we're trying to improve the fight line. We're going to share those aircraft, and then we're also I'm going to push over the F-16 training to the reserve. So they're going to carry the most of the weight on supporting that for us there in Fallon, as well as we are looking at bringing in former Nautic instructors that served on active duty in Fallon, and bringing back by name those individuals that have skill sets as former WTIs or Air Wing strike instructors, so they can complement. Also, the targeting community is 100% built off the reserve community, and that schoolhouse resides in Fallon, and we push them out into strike groups and around the world all the time. They are now looking at trying to bring in reservists to participate in my Miser WTI program, so that they have that capability as they currently support L&O and the NAIL positions at the AOCs, but trying to figure out how we can get them to do that in the mock and build that capacity and expertise that resides in the force. There are some tremendous opportunities. I like looking at the reserves because for me at Nautic, there's no, active duty. It's hard to grow capacity with manpower there, but the ability to bring reservists in to complement my staff and also bring in diversity of thought and other experiences that come with those individuals that work outside of DoD that may be working in some of the industry, technology, cyber, space, those type of things. It's huge. So very healthy relationship with CNR and TSW, and we're looking to expand it and grow that.
And if I could add in, so there are no pilots in the fleet unless they come through Sinatra. And Sinatra, 25% of my X's are produced by reservists. They are absolutely, I mean, absolutely critical for my ability to produce. As Pepper was saying, a reservist comes with a bevy of skill sets. Lots of times they're patch wearers, they've got tons of experience, and they just want to continue serving. And when they come back and they come to Sinatra, wow, they can almost jump into any flight that we have, which is phenomenal. The better part is that they like flying on the weekends. And so, I mean, I got lots of airplanes ready for the weekends, a lot of active duty not looking to fly on the weekends, and they can just fly their tails off. And so it's been great. Let me also just put a pitch out as well as the diversity of thought. So I've got Sausage in the back here, who's running our Project Corsair. So I talked about Avenger, Hellcat. Corsair is the T-45 version of that. He's a reservist and just crushing it. So very lucky to have reservists, and if there are anybody out there, tell them, come on by Sinatra. I've got plenty of space for you.
Don't forget 209 forward, BAQ 209 forward deployments to Indo-PACOM, as well as the last two P3 big reservists are transitioning to P8, or those two squadrons are transitioning to P8. So, the DFC guys and Rabbits.
Yeah, the piece of reserves that rarely gets talked about is our NUFIA assets. So the logistics folks. So little known fact, but our joint pubs say that when we're bringing our supplies forward to support our carrier strike groups, TRANSCOM is responsible for bringing it to the point of debarkation for either a sea or an air, and then the Navy is responsible for moving it to there to wherever we need it. We do that with Hertz and C-40s, and so all done by the reserves, and couldn't do it without them.
Okay, that's great discussion. So last question of the day, Mayor Boss, it's going to set you up for lunch, is what do you think about continuing resolutions?
I go back to General Mattis's, the way he described that is there's no threat, no matter what the NDS says, the most dangerous threat that we have right now is the continuing resolution. You look at what Bucket's buying and the stuff that we're training right now. If we can't continue with the funding for the new starts and working off 10% of last year's budget, and then continuing through, now we're already in the middle of December, and our burn rate is going to be, we're making an assumption that we will have a budget. So we are burning to a cliff. So essentially that's what the CR does for us. It makes us play chicken with ourselves, where we're running at full speed to a cliff. The timing for the threat right now, whether you're in Europe or in the Pacific, it is incomprehensible that Americans are having Americans run to a cliff like this. Incomprehensible.
All right. Help me thank you.